Hey, this is Ziggy Ramo. You're watching Get to Know with Filter.
Hey, I'm Jazz, you're watching Get to Know on Filter, and I've got a very special guest with me today. You've probably heard him on the radio. He is a hip hop artist, he is an activist, and really a pioneer for change. It's Ziggy Ramo. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you so much. That was probably too flattering, but
No,
appreciate it.
Yeah, like with everything going on at the moment with the Black Lives Matter movement and things like that, thank you for everything that you're doing with it and like teaching us through your music.
Yeah, no, that's I think that is somewhat of a privilege because I think, I obviously am from like a marginalized community and I've been kind of like given access to education and to an understanding of, I guess, like the bigger picture of what's going on. And obviously like that doesn't make me any better or worse, but I do feel like there's this, like we have to come from a place of compassion and it's about like trying to share that knowledge and trying to educate people. And I guess like trying to help people understand like their own motivation for change. Cause I think we all, I think humanity, like we are compassionate, like we're a social species, we need each other. So I think it's just like about trying to draw people's attention to that.
I really got that from the album. So you just dropped Black Thoughts. And tell me a little bit about that because you were working on it 5 years ago, but now is the time you decided to release it. How did it come about?
Yeah, it was a really just kind of like right time, right place moment. JCal, who produced it, we got introduced through like a friend of mine from way back called Jeremy Smith. And he just like took us into like this warehouse studio vibe. And the first day Jack and I met, we did like the first 3 songs basically that was on the EP. And then I was hospitalized because I was like really unwell and basically was on suicide watch. And while I was there, like for me, I didn't really think, I basically lost all hope. And for me, like Black Thoughts, I guess like in the last song, Kids, I have this line where I say, this obituary that I filled full of truths will now become very handy. And for me, like this album was literally just like, I didn't feel like as a country we were at a place like where we're ready to listen. Because I feel like through like marginalized communities, like you have voices that can lead the change that we need, but like if we aren't as a country ready to listen, and those voices just kind of fall on deaf ears. So for me, this album was kind of like I'd made peace at like leaving this world, and I just wanted to at least like leave my voice around kind of, and it's not even just my voice, it's like, like things my dad have taught me, like my elders have taught me, and we're an oral culture, so like our knowledge survives through songs, like through song lines, through voices. So for me, it was just like I just took all these beats from Jack and just like basically like wrote my obituary, like wrote my final thoughts of what I wanted to be left behind. And then just through, I guess, like a lot of love and support, like from my family, a lot of professional medical help, shout out to the doctors. I was able to kind of build myself back up, and I guess I just kind of left that album there because it was obvious that brings up a lot of trauma, but like it also was like very healing for me, like, and it no longer was really so much like an album, like it was, I guess, like more of that process.
I was wondering, what did you find it really like therapeutic? To put it out?
I think to put it out, it was really surreal because I was going to put out another song that I'd been working on that like I really loved, but it just like May 25th happened, like with George Floyd, and I saw like our country like really point a finger, like America, and kind of get on a high horse about like this is so terrible, and like evidently it's terrible, but I think we don't really have much grounds to stand on, like to look down at America because we are no better, like like the systematic racism that is kind of allowing for the events to happen in America, like that same systematic racism is here. It's just wears a different mask, like it just manifests in a different way. So for me, like when I saw all of us, like as a country, basically caring more about black bodies that were like 6,000 k's away, or however the distance is between Australia and America, but like we could empathize more with like black bodies from a distance, because like, you know, like holding America accountable doesn't mean anything for us. Like that's not any real work, because it's not us. So for me, when I kind of saw that, like I just, you know, like I have a lot of personal goals that I want to achieve as an artist and as a human being. And you know, like I'd always dreamt of like my first album, like being like at achieving like a certain amount of success or this or that. And I think I just kind of had to like leave like my pride at the door a little bit and just be like, look, like I've got this record here, like it sucks that it's still relevant like 5 years later, but like I think just like the quicker I can get this out, like it's a learning resource, right? So like whether or not people found it like the day that it came out, and that's like the thing, it's like timing. Like I was trying to rush it through, and like it dropped on the day of like the protests in Australia, and I was just like, oh, it was also always supposed to come out then and there. And then yeah, I think for me it's just like the longer it will be out, like the longer time like people have to connect with it, and because it's not like casual listening where you just like, oh, we're having a party, like let's put on Black Thoughts, like
especially with like final thoughts.
Yeah,
that was such a nice surprise. I did not expect the 20-minute conversation which taught me so much, like about statistics, about mental health, and then even something you said about like the Caribbean people, because that's like my background.
Yeah,
you taught me about like, I guess, history of hip-hop and how they were taken from the Caribbean to America, and some of their roles were to memorize poetry, and they could memorize poetry for like 4 hours, which is so interesting. And so like I can tell that you're someone that loves literature and poetry. And I guess I'm wondering, like, who are some poets or some musicians that resonate with you that you could put us onto?
Yeah, I mean, it's like it's weird. It's not even like putting them on because they're super established, but it's like for me, when I was like 15, Jay-Z put out his biography called Decoded, and that was like his autobiography, but he kind of told it through his songs. So like I think it was like 11 or 12 songs, and each chapter he talked about like the events in his life, and then a song, and then like broke down like what he was doing. So like the literary devices he was using, like whether it was like metaphor or double entendre or simile. And so then like for me, as like a 15-year-old who had like discovered like my passion for hip hop, like seeing like the inner workings of like Jay-Z's mind, of like when he approaches like structuring and writing, that was just like the Bible, you know, like it was like being able to kind of like pull the curtain behind and kind of see how his mind worked with that. So for me, I guess like, you know, like when I was younger, like I was like, I really like Shakespeare, which I kind of like talk about in Final Thoughts, because like Hamlet to me is just like, it's so, because like when Hamlet was written, so again, I'm going to preface, like Shakespeare's dad was like, he was a priest in the Catholic Church, because like you had the two denominations of like Roman Catholic and like Greek Orthodox, and basically like King Henry wanted to get a divorce, but in the Roman Catholic Church, like divorce isn't permitted. So he basically was like, we're going to start a new denomination called the Church of England, which is exactly like Roman Catholicism, except you are allowed to get divorced. And so for people living in England during that time, like that was a real big like head fuck, because like your whole life, like you'd been devoted to like Catholicism, and then your king just changed, like, so it like shook people's kind of like connection to their faith, and actually looking at like the fact that faith is kind of a construct, like it's designed by people, like the way in which like we have a connection to something higher, like the words and like the infrastructure is actually built by people. So like Hamlet is like such an interesting play to me, because like it's just that whole question of like humanity and connection to faith, and especially I think like you look at the relationship between faith and Christianity, like with colonialism, because like the doctrine of discovery was like written by the Pope in like the 1400s, which is basically like the framework which gave Columbus and then
How do you have all of this knowledge, by the way? Like, when did you decide you wanted to like seek all of this out?
I just think it's like the conversations that we need to be having.
Yeah.
Like, it has to come from fact, right? It's like if you want to like go to NASA and work as an astronaut, like you have to go and learn how to do that. Like it's the same thing. It's like if you're going to get an engineer, like they have to have studied engineering. So for me, it's like often like with racism or whatever, like people feel like they're entitled to an opinion, and opinion is a privilege, but like an opinion isn't fact.
Yeah.
So I think like it's so important when we have these discussions, like it's coming from a place of like research and knowledge and understanding, because otherwise it's just opinions. And opinions have kind of gotten us to a pretty, I don't know, pretty crazy place. Yeah. Like, I don't know if the systems are working that we're upholding, because it's like you look at the last 6 months and it's like obviously the conversation around like race relations, like we're in a global pandemic. I mean, Australia was on fire 6 months ago.
So crazy.
So,
to think
you know,
about.
like I don't know if these systems are serving us. So I think like when you're talking about them, like you have to have an understanding of how they got here. Otherwise it's just like, there has no weight in what you're saying.
And when you're writing such political music, do you ever fear that it could be interpreted in a different way? Like, does that ever play a part in your decision making of like what you're going to release?
Earlier on, like definitely, like I think I'd be lying to say that like, you know, when you introduce like the relationship between commerce and art, like there's always going to be like that fine line of like, this is my livelihood. So it's like obviously wanting to try and like make money, you know, but then at the same time, I think for me, like this, putting out this album was like pretty liberating in like, yeah, nah, fuck that. Like I know why I'm here.
It's so validating to listen to as well. Like obviously like I can't relate to your experience, but I can empathize with it in certain ways. And even with like April 25th, I thought that was such an interesting way that you did that song, because it just like made you think so deeply about the disconnect. And yeah, how have tracks like that been received? How do you feel now? So you're feeling like liberated, having like let
definitely.
It out.
I think it's like, and that's what I always say is like anything half smart I say is just like me saying something that someone way smart has already said. So like April 25th is just like, it's like an academic theory by Indigenous scholars like around like the black armband view of history. And it's like, if you're gonna celebrate the diggers and like the Anzac spirit, like that means you're accepting our history. And if you accept our history, you have to accept all of it. Absolutely. So you can't just pick out the high points and then neglect and pretend like the other parts didn't exist. Because it's so interesting, like with the Anzac spirit, like, right, like we, as the Allies in like World War II, like we went and fought against genocide. But it's so funny because all of the allies who were fighting against genocide obviously recognized genocide was bad, but were all perpetrating genocide in their own countries. So it's like, obviously like the Black Lives Matter movement in America is amazing, but it's like what's happening to their Indigenous people. Like it's just not spoken about. And same with us, like in the 1940s, like when World War II was happening, like Australian, like Indigenous people weren't even recognized as citizens in their own ancestral country. So I think for me, like why I like included Final Thoughts like at the end was like I guess I was in control of the narrative, like because obviously April 25th is like very provocative, but it's coming from a place of understanding, like, and I come back to like Jay-Z, like where he like talks about like 99 problems, like he talks about like writing in a way to basically like trick people into revealing their bias. So it's like if you are offended by April 25th, you actually haven't listened to the song. Because like obviously I say fuck the Anzacs, which, you know, some people might like find really disrespectful, but if you listen, like literally the line after that is, how fucked up is that?
Exactly.
How fucked up is that? We pick and choose our history, we rearrange the facts. So it's like,
Yeah.
if you actually listen to what I'm saying, like it's grounded in fact. Like it's obviously very emotional, but it's coming from a place of understanding, like, and actually from compassion. And the reason why I like chose the Anzacs is obviously because people feel like a strong sense of connection to that, and trying to like help people understand like how we feel about our culture is, it's like, because when like I attack the Anzac spirit, it's like that's what we feel every day in our own ancestral country that we've had connection to for 50,000 years. So yeah, I don't really give a fuck about like, actually let me reframe that. I give all the fucks. Like I care about this so much. And like the reason why I am holding Australia accountable is because I love, like, this is my home, like, this is my ancestral home. Like we are a black country, like we have black culture, we have black history. And it's like about celebrating that, about like acknowledging that, and like actually about telling the truth of like how we got here. And I think like what's been so amazing about like people connecting with the album is that it's very specific in like what I'm talking about like the bigger picture of like race relations between Australia and its Indigenous people. But like I think people can connect with it because it's trauma. Like, and unless you are straight, white, able-bodied, cis man who is in a like high socioeconomic tax bracket, you are marginalized in some form or another. So I never compare like oppression and marginalized community, because each oppression is unique, like each experience is unique. So I think it's like a waste of time to say like, oh, oppression Olympics. But I do think it's really important to understand the mechanism that oppresses us is all the same. So whether like you're oppressed because of race, gender, sexuality, whatever it is, like the mechanism is self and other. Like we're oppressing you because you're different. So like for that individual who is marginalized, their trauma is as valid and as real as anyone else's trauma. So I think when people listen to this album, like, yes, it's very specific, but they really can feel the trauma of an oppressed person. And as I said, most people have felt some form of oppression in their life. So I think like it speaks, like it's further reaching than just as Indigenous Australians.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I noticed that the album cover is a photo of your parents.
Yeah.
And I've heard you say that, you know, you identify as Indigenous and non-Indigenous. So can you like tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, my dad always said to us, like, you're not parts, like you're not 50-50, you're not 25, 14, 16%, this, that. It's like you're a whole human being. And it's like actually understanding like your bloodline. So it's like you're a whole person, you know? Like, so for me, it's about accepting all aspects of my culture, like that's Indigenous, non-Indigenous, Solomon Islander, Scottish, throwback Portuguese, and it's like understanding like the roles in which they played to make me who I am, and then also like the roles in which they played in like greater society. So it's like, you know, this arm isn't white, this arm isn't black, like it's like I'm a human being. So for me, it's about accepting us as a whole, like rather than like splitting us into parts, because I don't only accept 50% of like my Indigenous culture, I accept 100% of that, and vice versa. So I think it's also about an understanding of like how we all look different, because like the protectionist policies like throughout Australia's history is like removing people and then rape and everything. It's like you've got all these mixed up bloodlines because of what the government did to us, and now we have people saying you're not Aboriginal enough, and it's like actually like I look like this because of you. So like, you know, like you can't tell us to get on boats and go home, because like if that's what you really mean, then you'd get on a boat and leave, because like this is our home. But we can't, you know, we can't turn back on anything. I think it's about trying to like build an understanding of like moving forward.
Yeah, and being all of these things and embracing it all. It sounds like from songs like Pretty Boy, which is one of my favorite tracks, that it hasn't always been that easy for you.
No, no way. Like I'm a mess of a human being. Like honestly, like such a mess.
I feel like we all are.
Yeah, 100%. Like Pretty Boy for me was more of like, like growing up, like I didn't really feel that represented in Australian popular culture. You know, like I didn't. Like there were certain examples like in like sport or this or that, but like I didn't really feel that represented. And then obviously like, you know, like Eurocentric standards of beauty, like we're never gonna fit that. Like that's just not who we are. So I just like grew up riddled like with body issues and like body dysmorphia, like disordered eating, bulimia. And so for me, like making that song was more just about like I try and just be like the artist that I think I needed and wanted. And like, I think it's really important for like Indigenous kids or like kids of color in Australia to be able to see like people of color like accepting that they're beautiful like for who they are. And it's like that's something that I struggle with every day. Like that's not, I think when you have like body issues, it's not like a linear, you know, like, oh, I was bad, now I'm better, now I'm better, now I'm better, now I'm great, and I'm always going to be great, you know, like it's peaks and valleys. So like some days are harder than the other for sure, but I think it's just like a journey like within self and trying to like come to peace, and I guess like going through all that unlearning of like, you know, like trying to fit into a certain appearance and this or that. But I just think like as men as well, we often don't talk about like body issues or just anything really. Like emotionally we're kind of asked to do violence and like take on violence and not actually be connected with self. So I think like a song like Pretty Boy for me was just about like exploring that connection to self.
Yeah, and on the topic of literally what you just said of men kind of being pushed into a certain bracket of the things that they can and they can't do, and then that song challenges these gender norms. Like what's your relationship with like gender fluidity? Like what's your experience?
Well, I know it's always so funny. It's like I'm like, do people even like listen to what I'm saying? Because it's like the first verse, it's like my flow and my gender is so fluid. And it's like, because for me, like I never felt like I need to make like a post or this or that or like a big declaration of who I am or what my gender is or whatever, because I kind of grew up in a space where I could just be me. And I'm very much connected to my masculinity, but I'm like fully connected to my femininity as well. So like, I think for me, it's like, I'm just me. Like, I don't really feel, I think in saying that though, like I grew up like very like hetero presenting, so like I didn't have to go through like that same struggle that like a lot of people do like within gender identity. So for me, I'm always just like careful of like not wanting to take up space in a sense of like amplifying voices that have really felt like I think like full effects of that struggle. Like it's not that I like haven't struggled within myself, but like I don't feel like my like upbringing was like I didn't have to struggle as much to be who I was. Like I was really lucky like with a family space of just being me. So like for me, it's not necessarily about changing pronouns. Is because I feel as a man, it's really important that I hold men accountable, and it's not like distancing myself from my masculinity because I am both masculine and feminine. But for me, it's like we as men have to hold other men accountable because we are privileged. We're privileged as fuck. Regardless if you're like white or not, like if you're a man, like you have privilege from your gender. Do you know what I mean? So I think for me, it's like staying connected to my masculinity in a sense of like being able to have conversations that like are gonna impact men. I don't know if that like
no, it absolutely makes sense. It's kind of, I guess, similar to chatting with a white person about like what you're going through, and then that person starts to understand, can empathize with you, and then they can use their power and their privilege to educate other people. So that's what you're doing. You're like infiltrating from within 100%. In a really good way.
So I think for me, it's like, do I really like feel connected to masculinity in like that I want to be he or him? Like I couldn't really give a fuck because I know who I am, but
Yeah.
I know that like staying as like he and him comes with a certain sense of privilege and being able to infiltrate. So for me, it's about weaponizing like that privilege. And I think that's why it's so important that you understand your privilege, because like you like having, like you're born and just given this privilege, but if you don't understand what it is, then like you don't know how to like stop it from harming others.
Exactly.
Because your privilege does like come at a cost on someone else's behalf. So if you're not aware of your own privilege, then like you're not able to use that privilege for better, like for positive, rather than, I guess, oppressing people, you know?
With everything that's going on at the moment, like I imagine you're having like a lot of the same conversation. How do you navigate that and like just like kind of stop yourself from being re-traumatized every day? Like you don't really have control over that, but at the same time, like how do you manage your mental health now?
Yeah, I think for me it was like such a big journey of like when you become like disconnected from certain aspects of who you are. So like I always would, like when I was younger, I would suppress like my anger and I would suppress my trauma, and I would like be like, I don't want to be angry because that'll just like that'll affirm a stereotype of black men being angry, and then people won't want to listen to me. So it was like, I'm never angry, I'm gonna like throw that away. And then when I went through like a lot of counseling, like I realized doing that was making me even more angry. And so like when I was having conversations, it was actually coming from like a really toxic and filtered place. Like I wasn't able to be authentic, like within who I was completely. And kind of when I went through a lot of counseling, my counselor said something to me that was like really powerful of like, she was like, I'm angry right now. Like anger doesn't have to be yelling or screaming. I'm angry right now. Like I work in a medical profession that is completely dominated by men, and like that anger, like it sits within me. Like, but like when she kind of reframed that for me, I kind of understood like, I'm so angry. I'm like, I have so much trauma, I have so much pain, but like being able to actually accept that and then hold myself responsible to deal with that, like through professional help, like through understanding what I need to do, whether that's like eating right, exercising, drinking water, like sleeping enough, like just like being like responsible for myself. I think like kind of brought me full circle to be able to be like, yeah, I'm super angry, but it's like, I'm angry because I care.
Exactly.
And I love us, you know, like, and I care about all of us. So I think it's being able to accept that to come to like a full circle of like this is coming from a place of love. So like, if it is going to bring up trauma for me, I'm kind of willing to go there because it's on, like, I'm choosing to do that. And I have an understanding of like why, because I feel like it's important for people to understand like we have fucking trauma, you know, like it's really real. So I think like just like the fact that I've been able to come full circle and like I'm carrying it from a place of love, so it like isn't eating at me in the same way. I mean, there's times where it's like a lot, but I just always guess coming back to that kind of place of compassion and love.
That's so beautiful. Yeah, you're definitely very resilient. And it's funny because I had a conversation with a friend the other day that was super similar to what you just said about like, it's okay to be angry. Like we're allowed to be loving and compassionate and caring and angry and all these things. Like you're a human being, you're not just one thing. It's
a journey. Like don't let anyone tell you like how you should or shouldn't feel, or like how you should or shouldn't like how your activism should, like what form it should take. Like only you can decide that, like because that's the thing, it's a long game. Like the change that we're after, like I know a lot of people are like, we have to do it all right now because there's a window of opportunity, because these conversations are being had, but like the change that we all want is not going to happen in a week. It's not going to happen in a month. Like we're trying to like shift like frameworks of thinking, you know, like, because we can't police bigoted people, you know, like we're not going to be with them every step of the way.
Yeah.
So it's like actually trying to help build people's capacity to think, like, and to understand these issues for themselves so that they understand their own motivation to enact change. So like, it's a super long game. So just being able to be comfortable within yourself, and like your activism and the way you do it can take so many different forms. Like there's no right way to do it. Like you've just got to find a way that's sustainable for you, because from anyone who's in a place of oppression, every day you take care of yourself, like you're beating oppression, like you're beating a cycle. So like, if your activism is taking care of yourself, like that in itself is a victory.
Yeah.
So I think like just being comfortable within yourself and like what you can do and doing something that's going to be sustainable for you as an individual is so important.
Yeah, that's such great advice. Is that what you probably like would have said to your younger self, or to like other people? What's the message that you're trying to read?
So I think, yes, it is about like finding your own journey, but it's also like not shying away from the fact that like this is our job, like this is our responsibility. You know, I feel like we often like try and kind of sidestep that, but it's like, like this is the most important thing we're ever going to do. Like taking care of ourselves and this world, like that's the pinnacle of like what we can do. Like that's success, you know?
Bringing it back to Pretty Boy for a second, and everything that came with that song. One of my favorite things about the video clip was how you kind of referenced D'Angelo's Untitled. I think you like talked about that ages ago. Who are some other artists that inspire you?
So many. I think like for me, when I was growing up, like what my parents played around the house like was really impactful. So like a lot of like Sunday cleaning, like when we're cleaning the house, like mum and dad would just play albums. So like a lot of Stevie Wonder, a lot of Bob Marley, a lot of Lauryn Hill and Fugees. Like Miseducation of Lauryn Hill is like, I think my favorite album ever, probably. I think it's just like perfect.
So outside of listening to music and making music, what else do you like to get up to?
Not that much, honestly. Like a large part of my life goes into like music, and then trying to, like I'm in the process of starting my own label and publishing company. So a lot of time and energy is going into that. And then...
What does that look like? What's the plan for the label?
A lot of meetings. I think for me, like, because I've been independent my whole career, and I'm not so much interested at like just going and like doing a deal for myself and fitting into a system that doesn't represent us, because that hasn't changed anything. So for me, like wanting to build, like it's easy to point out like this industry's broken, but then it's like, what are we going to build that's going to replace that when we tear it down? So for me, it's like not just getting a seat at the table, but like being able to build a table so that like we can have lots of seats at it and have like people come through.
So exciting.
It's super exciting because like I really want to try and like help build something that can kind of, I guess, like, you know, it's not for me, like I just want to like put the infrastructure there so like artists can just be dope and be able to go and do their thing, like rather than having to try and fit into a system that hasn't been made for us.
It's so important to create these spaces ourselves, I think. So that's
100%. And I just feel like for me as well, like regardless how successful it is or not, like I also just want, you know, self-determination was stolen from us. Like it's not something I take for granted. So like whether or not like I get to work with all the artists I want to work with, like even if artists can see that just as a blueprint to be able to be like, oh, like I don't have to compromise. Like I can actually just build my own infrastructure. You know, like seeing someone like Briggs like do his own label and stuff, it's like, like it shouldn't just be one Indigenous label. Like we should all just like be doing our thing and like trying to build lots of different spaces for different artists to come through. So that's
making it happen.
Yeah, that's a lot of my time.
And so Get to Know is pretty much all about just like really getting to know local artists. So who are some people that you could put us onto? or that you admire locally?
Oh, Milan Ring,
Yeah.
like
She's
why?
insane.
Yeah, why she isn't the biggest artist in Australia? I don't understand. Yep, she's way better than everyone.
Have you been working with her?
Yeah, we actually we've been meaning to work forever. Just super busy and super driven people. So like I hadn't been able to make that happen. But we just I was able to bring her on to like MD a live performance with me because we just did a live performance of the album, like the first performance of it ever. We did it like top to bottom, but I really wanted to do it like as a live band. So she came on guitar and then also MD'd it all. So that was I was pretty fucking stoked on that.
When can we expect the album?
I think it should be out in the next 3 or 4 weeks.
Awesome.
Which I can't wait.
Cool.
And then JK47 is like from Brisbane. He's so dope. Also like Jerome Farah.
Yeah.
He just like put out a new track from Melbourne.
Absolutely. Well, I'm so keen to see and like listen to what that's like, the live set.
Yeah, I can't wait.
Yeah. And what else is on the way for you? Are you working on anything else at the moment?
Yeah, well, because the joy of having an album done for 5 years means you have a lot of time to work on other projects. So I've just kind of finished writing my second album. And we're just like mixing that at the moment. So
do we have a name?
Yeah, it's Sugar Coated Lies.
Okay. Why is it called that? Can you give us a tease?
Yeah, I think like Black Thoughts was like a very like explicit exploration of the bigger picture of like race relationships within Australia. Whereas like Sugar Coated Lies for me is like bringing humanity to like our indigeneity. Like often when we talk about these issues, like we get reduced to like statistics and numbers, but it's like those statistics and numbers are representative of human beings, like with real life experiences. So like Sugar Coated Lies, like ScoMo's basically been doing free press for me, because it's like, yeah, my Solomon Islander ancestry were like blackbirding, like they, you know, it was slaves, like we were brought over from Solomon Islands to work on the sugarcane fields, and like it's something we don't talk about. It's like 95% of sugar crops are grown in Queensland, and it's like that's where all the slaves are taken. And then it's like sugar is like the second biggest crop export in Australia. It's like $2 billion a year, and it's like built on slavery. Yeah, like our Prime Minister feels comfortable to not acknowledge the fact that slavery happened in this country. But yeah, so like Sugar Coated Lies, like my second album, I think is more of like, it's less explicit in what I'm talking about, because I guess I'm trying to like bring like the human experience to that trauma and like speak, I guess, like in a way that can reach beyond like people who agree with me.
It's crazy because I feel like your music is so educational, and there are a lot of songs as well that like really G you up, but then there are other tracks that also are like soothing and validating and just like nice to chill out to. So what are some songs that kind of make you joyful, that like, emulate Black joy for you?
That's such a good question. I feel like anything Prince is like, makes me feel pretty fucking happy.
Totally.
Yeah, that is such a good question. Even like with the indie, like, cause like I grew up in like East Arnhem, and like that always just makes me kind of feel like home. So that always has me like super connected. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for coming on and having a chat. I can't wait for the new music.
Yeah, I can't wait either.
Thanks.
Thank you.